Welcome back. City Hall was abuzz this week with a lot of work happening after this November election. Now local elections are just around the corner. Joining us now is Alderwoman Alisha Sonnier from the 7th Ward in Central South City, I guess you could say.
South City, Central South City.
Good to have you back with us. You're in the 7th Ward. That's an odd number. That means you're up for re-election in the spring, your first time facing re-election.
Correct.
After winning that seat. You also just brought a new revised bill to the Board of Aldermen that would expand housing shelter, and if I understand correctly, make it easier for existing homeless centers to expand their current facilities. Quite a journey you've had getting to this point.
It's been a long journey. It's been a very public journey, a journey of about a year. It's been a lot of lessons learned for me as a legislator, especially as someone who was, newer to it. And so this bill that's in front of us, Board Bill 114, that was perfected last week 10-5, and hopefully will be third and final passage this Friday, is essentially, making an argument that housing is a human right and it should be reflected in our zoning codes. And if that's the case, then we should allow for the various types of housing needs that we know that our city has, and it's on a conditional basis with the requirement of an operational plan, and then also has some density language so that we don't over-concentrate them. And this bill is just about zoning, so it does not touch the plat and petition process.
So if you live in the city of St. Louis and there's a homeless housing shelter somewhere near you, they might expand if they have plans to do that, but they have to go through a number of checks. They have to check a number of boxes in order to do that.
So the expansion right now, the language you see in nurse inspection is just protecting them so that if you want to expand in an area where you've already done your plat and petitioning, you don't have to go through this process because you've already gotten that feedback.
Are there those centers that have been trying to expand who could not?
The larger point of the bill is really the fact that a lot of the facilities are not allowed. So this is not just shelters, transitional housing, group homes, boarding homes. These things are NA on most of our zoning code or limited in much later areas. So what this bill does is rather than these facilities starting at the appeals process through the Board of Adjustment, they will now go through a conditional use hearing process, given that they're successful in getting their signatures and submitting their operational plans.
Similar to the liquor licensing.
Correct.
Yeah, there was a question at one point about is the city giving preference to selling liquor over housing people in need?
And I would argue that in some ways we still do. I mean, it's very different. So with the liquor license, they have a completely alternate path. With that, if you're a restaurant, you don't have to do plat and petition at all. You can get a temporary license for 90 days. This bill doesn't propose anything like that. You still have to go through the plat and petition process. And, we request things like an operational plan and things like that. But some of those differences are needed because these are facilities for, very vulnerable people in neighborhoods and communities. And so in some ways, it should be, more thoroughly vetted, and we should get more specific information.
Greater St. Louis, Inc., a group of big businesses in the city, and 4 of your colleagues in the Board of Aldermen brought forward a plan this week to spend the Rams money now, most of it. It would leave about $70 million unspent for the time being, but it would take the rest of that, about $230 million, I think, and split it, 56% going into the poorest neighborhoods in St. Louis, including your ward, and 44% going downtown. I imagine in an election year, when people want to see improvements, that would be hard to vote against.
Well, so I've had the pleasure of serving as the chair of Committee of the Whole, which has walked through all of the ideas that were submitted in the portal that got over 16,000 City of St. Louis residents to participate and give their ideas. One of the things that's not true is that there's no guarantee of which neighborhoods it will go through. The legislation actually just broadly says disinvested neighborhoods, and it does not define what that looks like or what that is.
Well, so, the SLDC's map, the Economic Justice Index, which shows it ranks 1 and 2. If you look at the yellow and green parts of that map, a lot of that is in your ward.
But that's not defined in the bill.
Not
in
yet.
The legislation that was brought forward, that was filed at the board, it does not specifically make any references to the economic justice plan. It just very broadly uses the term disinvested neighborhoods. So I would be interested in a bill sponsor of Greater St. Louis really defining what that means and what that looks like. And some of my other thoughts on the bill, again, when we've been going through this RAM settlement process, we've gotten to hear what a lot of the concerns are of the entire city. And certainly infrastructure is at the top of everybody's mind, but that does include things like our water division, our water department. We've heard a lot of people advocating and talking about the need for us to make sure we don't run into where many other cities have across the country. We've had a lot of conversations about investing in early childhood. We have that hearing coming up. They haven't even gotten to fully make their case for how they'd like to see. We've had people come and present to us and talk to us just about a plethora of ideas, including the city's workforce, right? Which I know is at the top of a lot of City of St. Louis residents, is that my services are not running as efficiently. A lot of the folks who you see that that voted against Board Bill 114 have said, well, I can't do it because we don't have the staff to trust it. And so my thoughts on the current bill that's in front of us is I think, number one, for a corporate private entity to be leading an ask and not bringing up any matching funds, I have a lot of questions about that. If we're going to have a private-public partnership, then it's got to be a partnership, and it can't be the public dollars that are the only ones on the table. And I would like to see more specific definition of what disinvested neighborhoods is. And I would like to see something that broadly addresses the many desires that have been lifted up through the process.
It's an interesting question because as currently drafted, for example, Alderman Tom Oldenburg, he's supporting this bill, though it would give not 1 cent to his ward, not 1 penny. Now, you could say if downtown is better and there's more attraction, there's more business downtown, maybe it helps the whole city, and that's a benefit. Alderman Joe Vollmer's ward wouldn't get a penny. Alderman Brett Narayan's ward wouldn't get a penny. I don't know that you're going to get a better deal than that. A lot of the money focused in wards like yours, how would that seems like, let me ask you the question this way. If the money was earmarked to go towards those economically disaffected areas, and there were projects, are there projects right now, infrastructure projects that you could look at in your ward and say, hey, we could put the money here?
There are projects, infrastructure projects, but I do have to go back to the portal. The 7th ward that I represent, the idea that they most strongly supported was actually early childhood education and things around public transit inspection and things around like water and infrastructure. So again, infrastructure is such a bold claim in a piece of legislation. We need to walk that out and figure out what that looks like, because what we saw in the portal is not necessarily aligned with what is in the bill. And I would say for me, as someone who serves the city and has to work through our processes, I certainly want to see some of our city workers get some support. I think that's really important. They didn't get a raise this past year because of the earnings tax being cut, but most of them are accomplished to that raise. And there's no department in the city of St. Louis that's going to tell you that they have adequate staff to do what they need. And so I think that there has to be a way to use this once in a generation money and figure out how can we use this to fix our problems long term. Because another problem with infrastructure is that we don't have any maintenance in the city of St. Louis. So you can allocate millions of dollars and do this project once, but who's going to come back and keep that money going? And right now what you see is community improvement districts and special business districts, which actually additionally tax the residents to cover that need. But we can use this money in a proactive way that I think can address the many concerns and many ideas in that portal and honors what the Board of Aldermen has committed to and is specific in where that money goes and potentially prevent problems not just one time with the funds, but long term.
You're talking about this portal, and for any of our viewers who may not know, that's this survey that went out, and people in the city responded to it, and I think they listed 6 items. The 2 items that are in that portal or in that survey response that are not included in this bill are what you've already mentioned, the pay raises for city workers and the expanded benefits or tax credits or some kind of financial support for early childhood education. The question there, though, let's set those aside for a second. The infrastructure payments, the streets upgrades, those are all one-time payments. You have one-time pot of money, you can pay for those things now, you can see it, it's tangible. On the raises for city workers and on the expanded early childhood education benefits, those are both ongoing recurring expenses. What happens when the RAMS money runs out?
I mean, it's up to us and how we decide to use it. One of the ideas that's most popular in the portal is also a municipal endowment fund that proposes that we put the money into a fund and we sponsor a number of ideas based off the interest that has occurred. And that means that rather than just having this money one time, you have this money long term. As an alder, and I think this is something all of my colleagues will say, I can go pay for the alley paving of something right now and spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on that. But right now, there's no proactive maintenance on that. And so if nobody comes back and reinvests that in the next 2, 3, or 4 years, we'll be back where we started. If we use the money in an intentional way and think long term and really get to the root of our problems, we have an opportunity here to get ahead of some of these things and begin to have long-term plans and to have money for maintenance of these things.
That's why I think it's so interesting to have a conversation with an alderman who's facing re-election now, because it is the pressure of winning re-election. You want to go back and show your voters, we did something now. It's really hard to tell voters that are already impatient, wait longer.
But I think that you're not telling them to wait longer. I can say for the 7th Ward, for a lot of my constituents, what you hear is you guys did all of this with the ARPA funds, and we have frustrations about where that money is going and how long it's taken to get that out the door. So I think that when I actually talk with constituents, engage them and say, hey, the city right now has to get all of the ARPA money out, or we have to send that money back to the federal government. And meanwhile, the RAM settlement funds are sitting in an interest-bearing account every day, and every time that we're not spending it, it's just building upon itself. And so I think when you explain it to people in that that way it makes sense. And for me as a political leader, you need to do what you think is right. You need to use the position that your community has put you in. And for me, we are here to solve problems. And I would love to solve problems in a way that 10, 20 years ago, if there's another woman sitting in my seat, she doesn't have to tackle the same problems that we've been tackling for 10 or 20 years. And right now, I think the city is facing head-on issues, but we're facing issues that we've been facing for a long time. But with these once-in-a-lifetime funds, we have an opportunity to address these issues, propose a solution that solves them long-term. Not just one time, we did this here and we did that here, and then 10 years from now, somebody's having the same conversation.
Well, what's interesting is some of the specific items or categories, and you're right, they are vague. They don't say we're going to build X project at Y intersection, but they say, hey, here's a bunch of money going to this category. Like there's $10 million for housing, and that could be available in your ward.
Right, but again, very broadly. I have to tell constituents, not say, oh, I have $10 million for what?
Well,
for what?
I think not to speak for them, but hearing Alderwoman Keyes and Alderwoman Boyd speak about it, they said that over the legislation process, once they hear input from people like you, it will take that more specific shape and form, and we'll start to see what it could be spelled out and what it would look like in concrete form. So let me ask you, if you consider this like a ward capital program on steroids, are there 3 or 4 wish list items in your ward that are at the top of your list where you said, hey, if I could spend that Rams money to do this in my ward, what would that look like?
I think if I could spend the money to fund anything, and for me, I can only think about what my constituents really advocate for and what they bring up the most. And so when I think of constituents, absolutely infrastructure is at the top of their minds. I have a lot of constituents that are very frustrated that they have to go through their alder to get what they think should be guaranteed as a result of paying their taxes. So that would be my first interest, is how do we fund our infrastructure needs in a long-term way with professionals that maybe even takes some of the power away from alders and puts it in the hands of professionals. The second thing that I would fund, if I could pick one thing based off of what's been brought up, a lot of my constituents' top concerns are around childhood education and access, because when you're thinking of families that have to pay mortgages for childcare, which is what's happening right now, it's a struggle for a lot of them. And so you see a lot of people choosing to delay reproduction or choosing to leave a working, someone who could be working to stay at home. That's at the top of the list. The third thing that I think a lot of my constituents bring up regularly, there's no one who's not going to talk about public safety. There's no one who's not going to bring up crime and how do we get ahead of that and proactive development. And then I think the fourth thing would be something around, the city's workforce and making sure that their constituent services, they don't have to come through their alderwomen to again get what they should be getting. And in my seat, that is because we have all of this vacancy within city departments, and that's because people are highly underpaid. We're not competitive. I think that it is the result of how these systems have been run, right? I think that we have been struggling with vacancy in city departments for a long time, certainly before I came to office. I think that we're not competitive municipality-wise. You're already a public entity, but we don't even compete with, municipalities. So that's why you hear me keep lifting up, city worker, infrastructure, childcare, because these are things that overall will help with the city. And especially when you think of one of the most pressing issues facing the city is a declining population. If we can figure out some of these issues, I do think these are things that long term will help to sustain our population and to grow our population while addressing several, because we don't have to pick just one thing that residents have asked for. I do think that proactive leaders can find a way to invest in multiple things.
All right, really enjoy the conversation and love covering City Hall, but let's switch gears now. I know all politics are local, but let's talk national for a minute. You look at the map. First of all, how are you feeling about the election results?
I think Missouri is very interesting because to know, as a black woman, that I live in a state that overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump, President Trump, that reelected Josh Hawley, but also that put abortion access and reproductive justice back on the map and voted for that, and also voted overwhelmingly for paid family medical leave and for a living wage. It's a very interesting paradigm to live in and to walk out. And so I feel I would be lying if I said I didn't feel a little hopeless if I don't have a lot of fear and anxiety of what's ahead, especially for LGBTQ members, especially for immigrant members, for black people, for the Department of Education, for things that I used to think would never be up for question that seem, could be up for question. That really scares me. But on the other side, I do feel very hopeful because even in a super Republican state, it seems like we do agree that there's certain things that human beings should have, that human beings should be able to make their own reproductive decisions, that human beings should get living wages, and that human beings should be able to take sick time off. So that does give me some hope.
When we dig into the data, we see that Vice President Kamala Harris outperformed Joe Biden's numbers in the battleground states overall. She got more raw votes for Democrats in those battleground states than President Biden did, but not in the big cities, not in the base of the Democratic Party. in the big urban city centers, there was depressed turnout. It was a lot lower. Why?
I think there's a number of reasons. So I would encourage us not to pick one. I think absolutely the first thing I'm going to do is say you got to always count in racism and sexism. So let's just give that there was going to be some people that it is a black woman who's being proposed as to be helmed.
But would that be found most prominently in urban city centers that reliably vote Democratic?
I think so. I mean, I think, again, you're talking about putting someone at the helm who is a black woman, so they're all kind of subconscious things, and I would just never discount that, but I said first. I think the second thing that I would really encourage Democrats to look at is we need to be self-reflective. I think you can see that many voters, like myself, are struggling, and one of the things that I can say about the Republican Party is that they stand on business. I don't agree with the business that they stand on, right, but they say we're going to ban your books, we're going to punish your doctors, we're going to punish your teachers, we're going to build the walls. They make it clear they have a strong vote agenda and they stand on it. And I think there are a lot of voters who don't feel that the Democratic Party does the same thing, that we don't have a vote agenda, that we don't take strong principled standards and deliver on the business. And so I think that our inability in some ways, this desire to very much lean to the right. You know, there was an announcement that one of the first things I'll do is I'll start a bipartisan advocacy council. For me personally, that didn't excite me because you want to start an advocacy council with people who want to take away my constitutional rights. And you don't see Republicans do that sort of thing. And so if I was saying, why did we lose? I think obviously she only had 100 days to campaign. Always want to count in racism and sexism, but I think there's a desire from voters who are typically Democrats to have political leaders who will take bold stances that are in their interests, who will hold corporations and private interests to task, who will advocate for the right to housing, who will advocate for humanity, whether it's here or abroad. I think people are tired of feeling like people just come to us every 4 years, try to sell us what they want, but they don't really take bold stances. There are some things that are not hard. Medicare for all is not hard. People deserve access to health care. I'm going to rally around it and make sure they get it. Access to a quality public education. It's not hard. Most people want those things. And I think in the state of Missouri, our election results actually show that. And so I think that that had a lot to do with the disconnect that was there.
Interesting. So it sounds like you're saying, for example, Kamala Harris campaigned alongside Liz Cheney, embraced the endorsement of her father, Dick Cheney, promised she would appoint a Republican to her cabinet. You think those actions might have depressed Democratic turnout?
I don't think that they excite people. I don't think that they inspire people. I don't think that they make people feel, I mean, again, what Donald Trump is, when his base looks at him, they feel represented and they feel like he will fight for us and he doesn't care who doesn't agree.
So copy his playbook.
Not his playbook. His method of here are my principles and here are my values and this is what I believe and this is what I'm going to do and standing on it. Not his playbook at all, because his playbook is very anti-humanitarian.
I didn't mean the policies, but the style, the tactics.
The boldness. Just be clear about what we believe in. Let's not make people have to guess. Do you support workers or you don't? Then it shouldn't be hard to say where you are on the living wage. It shouldn't be hard to say where you are on healthcare access. It shouldn't be hard to say that people deserve access to housing and quality education. Let's have a spine and stand up straight and be proud to stand up for humanity and make sure that our vision and our values are very bold and very clear and that they're not all these questions attached to it. And let's not be scared to leave people who we don't align with, because the other party certainly isn't. Let's say, here's where we are, here's what we believe. We hope you'll join us and give people that option. There's
a preview of the debate to come within the Democratic Party from one of the youngest voices in that party in St. Louis. Thanks for joining us.